Majority Report with Sam Cedar.
The destiny of America is always safer in the hands of the people than in the conference rooms of any elite.
Sam Cedar.
They are unanimous in their hate for me, and I welcome their hatred.
We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
The Majority Report with Sam Cedar.
Ever get the feeling you've been cheated?
It is Tuesday, February 25th, 2020. My name is Sam Cedar. This is the 5-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On the program today, illegal. How America's lawless immigration regime threatens all of us. Elizabeth Cohen will be on the program. Meanwhile, Bloomberg throws the gold-plated kitchen sink at Bernie Sanders after Sanders' latest polls show he is expanding his national lead. He's taken the lead with African Americans from Joe Biden. Meanwhile, Donald Trump focuses on the stock market and ignores the coronavirus as the production and shipment of 150 different prescription drugs are now in jeopardy. Meanwhile, Trump is in India as attacks on Muslims increase. And Mitch McConnell furthers the assault on a woman's right to choose and her bodily sovereignty. Meanwhile, the FBI is investigating a massive Border Patrol Union funds embezzlement case. And again, once again, calls for Clarence Thomas to recuse himself because of the work of his wife, Ginny. Harvey Weinstein, found guilty of rape, awaits sentencing. And the UC Santa Cruz strikers are to be fired from their teaching assistant positions. All this and more on today's program. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Just a programming note for you. Today is Tuesday, February 25th at 8 p.m. or so, maybe 7:30. We will be starting our coverage of tonight's debate. There is a debate tonight in South Carolina, if you were not aware of that, or if you were unaware, I should say. And that debate promises to be a rather, I think, explosive one. I think it's safe to anticipate there are going to be attacks from Michael Bloomberg on Bernie Sanders. I think it's fair to anticipate there will be attacks on Michael Bloomberg from Elizabeth Warren and just about everybody else. I believe it is fair to assume that Amy Klobuchar and Pete Buttigieg will be maybe coming to actual fisticuffs.
Oh my God, I cannot wait to see that.
Tom Steyer's in the race. And Joe Biden is scheduled to be there, but one never knows. One can get lost on the way to the debates. And we will... we actually have a programmatic announcement today to make about Joe Biden, but we will hold off on that. We have one video to play, but we're entering into the realm where we're not going to play certain videos about Joe Biden.
Or sound drops.
Some sound drops we're going to keep.
Right. But some we're going to retire.
But there's some we're not. We're going to retire.
In the interest of...
In interest of encouraging him to retire as well.
Honestly, it's just...
Yeah, it's at one point... but who knows? I mean, the reality is Joe Biden could win tonight. Not tonight, Saturday in South Carolina. So we'll see.
He's so much more charming when you depict him as like this Mr. Magoo-like character.
Especially like on the pages of The Onion.
Yes. And if he was just not sort of like, if there wasn't the potential that he could actually win the nomination and all of our fates would be in his hands. That's the most concerning thing. Ladies and gentlemen, it's been a while since we've checked in with the pontiff. Of course, I'm speaking of Ben Shapiro. He is the self-anointed Pope of the Jews. He is the one who gets to determine who is a Jew and who is not a Jew. And let's weigh in today to see who Ben Shapiro has decided by his great grace, his holy grace, who shall be a Jew and who shall not be a Jew.
You're deeply concerned about anti-Semitism, but you don't care about the fact that Bernie Sanders he campaigns with open anti-Semites. That Bernie Sanders is the Jeremy Corbyn of the United States. He spends all his time hanging out with people who despise Jews. And
pause it for 1 second. Now, for the analogy to be correct, aside from all the other lies that he's telling, Jeremy Corbyn would also have to be Jewish. Right? That's the breakdown in the analogy.
Well, Bernie's not really Jewish, though.
Well, we got to get there. But I mean, even nominally, Jeremy Corbyn does not even claim to be Jewish. In fact, he doesn't even claim that his family members, distant family members, were killed by Hitler for being Jewish. That's where the analogy breaks down at the beginning.
And want to see the Jewish state destroyed. Okay, the Bernie Sanders over the weekend suggested, he's never spoken at an AIPAC policy conference, by the way, at an American Israel Public Affairs Committee conference. He's never spoken at one, not for years, ever. Right now when he was a presidential candidate in 2016, never. Okay, he put out a statement suggesting that he would not speak at AIPAC, said Bernie Sanders, who, again, when people talk about his Jewish roots, he's so Jewish. In terms of his actual practice, in terms of how much he cares about Judaism, not his ethnic Judaism. Ethnic Judaism is ethnic. Judaism is just an ethnicity. But in terms of his actual practical Judaism and how much he cares about Judaism, dude's as Jewish as a ham sandwich. He's Jewish like Karl Marx was Jewish. Okay, Bernie Sanders tweets out, the Israeli people have a right to live in peace and security. So do the Palestinian people. First of all, I've not seen one shred of evidence that Bernie actually believes that Jewish people in Israel have a right to live in peace and security, since he has backed every single deal that would do damage to the safety and security of the people of Israel and supports giving...
Pause it for 1 second. Now, Ben surely knows this because he is the Pope of the Jews. But not every Israeli Jew would constitute a Jew in Ben Shapiro's mind. I've got I imagine that the Pope of the Jews has been to Israel, but surely his pontiff, his grace, must be aware that there are many Jews in Israel who do not practice Judaism whatsoever.
Yeah, there's some real bad ones in Tel Aviv.
I mean, they're just culturally Jewish, according to the Pope of the Jews, Ben Shapiro.
Have a right to live in peace and security, since he has backed every single deal that would do damage to the safety and security of the people of Israel and supports giving foreign aid to Hamas. He said, I remain concerned about the platform AIPAC provides for leaders who express bigotry and oppose basic Palestinian rights. For that reason, I will not attend that conference. As president, I will support the rights of both Israelis and Palestinians and do everything possible to bring peace and security to the region. Bullcrap. Hey, bullcrap. AIPAC is the most milquetoast organization in Israel affairs. Like the most milquetoast. They have everybody. Democrats, Republicans, moderates, they have everybody speaks to AIPAC. Okay, but Bernie is saying that AIPAC is too much for him. As we'll see, Bernie is fine with anti-Semites in his own campaign. So spare me your crocodile tears over anti-Semitism. All you ridiculous leftists who don't give a damn when Jews are under rocket fire in Israel and don't give a damn when Jews are being beaten on the streets of Williamsburg. Now you're coming out of the woodwork to inform me that Chris Matthews is an anti-Semite because he made an oblique statement about people who aren't willing to accept reality in history. People are ridiculous. You're ridiculous. You don't give a crap about anti-Semitism. If you did, you wouldn't be nominating a guy who is more than happy to hobnob with anti-Semites. Again, the man's as Jewish as Karl Marx was Jewish.
Aside from the irony of all the people that Ben Shapiro has platformed, in his day and has supported, who have platformed other people who have a far more militant claim. Now, of course, the Pope, Ben Shapiro, does not believe that Bernie Sanders qualifies as Jewish because the Pope, Ben Shapiro. Now, let me ask you this. I know everybody says that he wears a kippah, but doesn't also the Pope also wear what looks like a kippah? Because I wonder if Ben Shapiro, when he's not out in public, wears the big Pope hat. Now,
so I just tried to look up to see if, calling people Jews in name only was one of the things he apologized. And so here's a giant list of all the dumb stuff I've ever said. Don't worry, I'll keep updating it thing. But it's behind a paywall now.
That's smart.
Oh, that's brilliant. Yeah, folks, incidentally, that reminds me, I have written a list of some of my largest apologies for a lot of things that you're not aware.
Some of the worst stuff you've done.
Some of the worst things I've done, things that I have never, ever even acknowledged happened in public. And that's available to you as a member of the Majority Report. Now, of course, you got to come in as a Sam Cedar member. That is $1,000 a month. But again, that allows you to see the all of the horrible things that I've done and my apologies for them. And of course, we only take that in year-long installments. So you could sign up at jointhemajorityreport.com. And I've just been informed that the Pope yarmulke is called a zucchetto. So, I mean, it's not unclear to me if what Shapiro is wearing is a kippah or a yarmulke, or in fact, a zucchetto.
I'm learning a lot.
He's the Pope. He gets to decide who a Jew is and who a Jew is not.
Yep, and all the Jews listen to him.
Now,
that's just what we're like.
Here's the thing. Ben Shapiro practices Rabbinic Judaism. And everyone knows that Rabbinic Judaism is less than 2,100 years old. I practice the only true Judaism, which is the one of the temple, where priests ruled the day, Hebrew priests, and we, because I say we, because I am a real Jew, and Ben Shapiro is a pretender. And the high priests would accept all sorts of gifts and sacrifices. So you could bring me a goat or you could bring me money. And it wasn't until Ben Shapiro's friend Jesus came in and threw the money changers aside. So it is so ironic to me that the Pope, Ben Shapiro, pretends that he knows what Jews are. But I tell you right now, I am the one who decides who a real Jew is. And Ben Shapiro is no real Jew. In fact, this whole APEC conspiracy is what is known as a beard. It's a beard to hide the fact that he's not a real Jew. And I also notice he shaves. He shaves in the 5 points. It's a real problem. It's a real problem.
I thought you were going to say you practice the immortal science of Marxist-Leninism.
No, that is not true either. I just am full on temple-based Hebrewism. So there you go, folks. Oh, we've talked about Embark many times. Where did I get Kelly? Where's Kelly's thing? I thought I printed that out. I did, but I think Brendan threw it out. So Embark is a breed and health test. Basically tells you your dog's DNA. I got it. I'm all right. And it is the key to unlocking what your dog's unique breed mix are, what their health situation is from a genetic standpoint. And there's a lot of benefits to this. Like, it wasn't until we started running ads for Embark that I really fully appreciated this this service. So we had Kelly try it for Edie. which is her dog, not old Kelly, but formerly of the show Kelly, formerly in studio Kelly. And this is what she told me. I received Edie's results from Embark. There's so much information about her. She tested clear for all 171 genetic health conditions they screened for. And she's not a carrier at risk for any of the genetic diseases they test for as well. Now, this apparently is hugely important because there are ways in which you can feed your dog. There are medications you can give your dog if you find out that they are predisposed. And apparently this happens depending on, if they've been bred or whatever it is for certain diseases. And with that type of genetic information, you can figure out what kind of food is going to keep them as healthy as possible. People love their dogs. I got an email, I think I mentioned this last time, from a listener in England who was talking about his brother's relationship to their dog and that his brother had some issues in terms of like socialization. And the dog has just been amazing in terms of getting this kid to be able to sort of like have less social anxiety. And so the dog's health becomes huge. And just knowing stuff about the dog has been a huge sort of boon for not only his brother, but the whole family. Kelly went on to say there's also a full clinical trait report, which is great news. Most importantly, I can provide the report to her vet, which will provide so much information, help with Edie's health as she grows up. The Embark dog DNA test, it's the most comprehensive kit on the market. It looks at over 250 breeds, looks at 170 genetic health conditions. Somebody last time, I think we read this ad, Nomi was on the show. She had mentioned something about it in terms of knowing its relatives. And we thought like, oh, you don't know that. And then somebody tweeted at us with like a whole breakdown of the dog's relatives.
Long lost relatives?
I mean, I would imagine for a dog, they're all long lost for the most part. Embark is the only research-grade dog DNA test kit on the market. Scientists look at 200,000 genetic markers, and they make scientific discoveries that help all dogs have longer, healthier lives. And they're accurate down to a 5% breed component. Embark has stellar customer service and vets and veterinary geneticists on staff to talk you through your results. Right now, Embark has an exclusive offer you can't get anywhere else. Go to embarkvet.com now. Use the promo code majority. Save 15% off your dog DNA test kit. Visit embarkvet.com. Use promo code majority to save. Check it out, folks. I don't need to tell you how much you love your dog. I hope not. That would be weird.
I'm a little mad they don't have one for cats.
Yeah, why don't they have it? Do they not?
I just got another cat, actually. I would be intrigued by something like that.
Yeah. I don't know. It seems like dogs have more health problems than cats. Is that true? Because I don't think cats are cats bred in the same way.
Seems like it. No, I mean there are like lots of fancy breeds of cats, but I guess most cats people have are just like regular ass cats.
All right, well, folks, I'm going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to be talking to Elizabeth Cohen about her book, Illegal, How America's Lawless Immigration Regime Threatens Us All. We'll be right back after this. Sam Seder on the Majority Report. On the phone, it's a pleasure to welcome to the program Professor of Political Science at Syracuse University, Elizabeth F. Cohen, author of Illegal: How America's Lawless Immigration Regime Threatens Us All. Elizabeth, welcome to the program.
Thanks so much, Sam.
All right, I want to start, and what you've given us is a history of sorts of our immigration policy, in many respects, our lack of immigration policy, and really until the present day. I'm not sure what that was, but let's start with the 1924. It's the National Origins Act, right? The Johnson-Reed Act.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. This was our country's first attempt at comprehensive immigration reform, and it was comprehensively restrictionist based on race. So Congress enacted quotas for almost all countries sending immigrants to the United States at the time. Those were European countries. It was based on a lot of pretty shoddy race science about who would make a good citizen, who was and was not white. At the time, most European countries were not considered white ethnicities in the U.S., and it effectively ended most immigration to the U.S. in the 1950s.
What was the impetus? What was the impetus of that act? I mean, just broadly speaking, from a political standpoint, and I guess prior to that, what was the immigration situation? Because I think I've spoken to people who suggested that the influx of immigration prior to that time was in part a function of a desire to essentially squeeze out recently freed slaves from much of the workforce. Oh, we've lost her. Yeah, hold on for 1 second. Well, yeah, we'll go to the break. Sorry. Sorry about that. I think we lost you for a moment. So you had just told us essentially the concept behind the National Origins Act. My question to you was two-part. One was, what was the political environment that spurred that legislation? A, and B, that wave of immigration I have read that preceded the 1924 Act, maybe in the decades prior to that, was in part a function of a desire to bring in more people, white people, or presumably European people, I guess, who maybe were not necessarily considered white, as a way of squeezing out recently freed slaves and limiting their opportunities, particularly in the cities. What, if you know anything about the latter, please tell me. And if you, sir, obviously about the former, what the political context for that legislation was.
Yeah, I mean, the political context really, it's an outgrowth of very early 20th century race science and early pushes at sociobiology. I'm sorry to say that I'm a social scientist, and these are early social scientists doing what they think is social science, looking at craniometry and skull size and looking for who they judge will be good citizens. And unsurprisingly, they find that lots and lots of people who are not considered white at the time are unlikely to make good citizens based on their measurements. And then something in 1911, the Dillingham Report, commissioned by Congress, turns this into a massive study of immigrants and immigrant neighborhoods. finding that recent immigrants at the time from mostly South and Eastern Europe, so Italy, Sicily, Hungary, Russia, Poland, and also Irish immigrants, that they just like fail in every way to demonstrate that they're assimilating, that they're good workers, all these things. It's pretty racialized, but I think the thing that's very hard for people in 2020 to wrap their heads around is that none of these people were considered white at the time. So to kind of hear the narrative that there was an attempt to bring white people from Europe into the country to make things harder for native-born African-American workers is a little difficult to reconcile with the very clear language you hear both in that report and then from like Wilson and others, that they did not consider the people coming from Europe at the time to be white, or that they would become white, or that they could assimilate. So there's a lot of racism, and certainly, in the labor market, there were attempts to squeeze the labor market and keep wages down on lots of fronts. But the reason for shutting the doors was because the people who were coming in were kind of upsetting the genetic mix of the country, according to some of these folks writing the legislation.
And so, what was the impact of that shutting the door to Europe?
Sure, it's a pretty dramatic, immediate drop in immigration because the quotas limited the opportunity for almost anybody from a country that was where people wanted to come from almost to zero. So, I found it interesting in doing the research in this book to look at the country by country quotas and then match them up to what people were saying. And like even the Scandinavian countries that Trump talks about as kind of model white potential immigrants, Norway and Sweden, they were, by many of the people writing this bill, not considered eligible, like not white enough. So immigration plummets throughout the 20s. One notable thing about the bill is that they omitted any reference or restriction on immigration within the Americas. So it's possible still to come from Mexico, and once there's essentially a halt on labor coming from Europe, Mexican immigration starts. There was already immigration coming in from Mexico, but it goes up. So that's one of the first consequences. Second, we invent a federal border patrol, and it's tiny, but that's where that gets going. It's part of the 1924 Act because you had to actually police the border once you had one. And then the beginnings of a rudimentary documentation system because we hadn't really been doing much documentation before that. So all of the kind of infrastructure that we're really familiar with now, it didn't exist at the time on the federal level. So enforcement had to be invented during that decade. But the most important thing is immigration just like stops from Europe. It just grinds to a halt.
And so what changes going forward in terms of, what are the implications? I mean, you say there's a rise in immigration from Latin America, from Central America. What else happens, and does that take us all the way up to the Hart-Celler Act, or is there any dramatic change in between the 24 essentially and 65?
Yeah, I think part of the story there is building enforcement, building border patrol. It's really interesting to me that early on that Mexico is very eager to cooperate with U.S. enforcement, particularly Border Patrol, because they're not happy about the fact that so many highly skilled farm workers and other people are leaving the country, and like they're pretty interested in us enforcing some kinds of rules about who can cross over the border. That's less true for people in border communities who find it incredibly disruptive to have people essentially sent from Washington telling them what to do, and like they didn't like that they were enforcing prohibition and stuff like that. You get penalties for the first time for being unauthorized in the country in 1929. We never had federal penalties for being unauthorized prior to that. So I talk about that. but like it's a buildup of enforcement and of a particular type of enforcement culture that that carves out a lot of exceptions that aren't available to other law enforcement agencies. Like really early on, just establishing themselves as very, very heavily empowered in ways that we can now see coming to fruition.
Let's talk about some of those early powers, and then we can talk in a bit. We'll circle back around to talk about the how those. What I would constitute, I mean, to me, constitute abuses, but in some ways they're sort of like, built-in structurally. Like, how are they able to do that? How is it that, they have this, first tell us how they exceed the authority of other police agencies, and then explain how it is they get away with it.
Yeah. So in the book, I tell a two-track story, and the two tracks are kind of first starting with a culture, I call it like a culture of impunity, where their border patrol, which is what it's called at the outset, is like hard to staff. It attracts a lot of people with criminal records, people who aren't particularly, they can't pass their civil service exam, and like border patrol essentially gets permission to just hire people who don't pass because they can't staff themselves without doing that. And then, so there's like this early agency culture of breaking rules and getting away with it. And then at a certain point, they also the agency itself starts to say, like, we can't operate in the way that other law enforcement operates. We need exemptions and exceptions. And so they start asking for permission to do things like warrantless searches and seizures, both at the border, so at checkpoints, and then on the interior. And they start out with that in 1946, and then kind of try and get that institutionalized so that we get to a point now where we have two zones in that Customs and Border Protection operate in. One is better known, it's the 100-mile zone. So 100 miles from any point on the U.S. border into the interior, 100 miles is their jurisdiction, and there are essentially interpretations of the Fourth Amendment, which is supposed to protect us from unreasonable search and seizures, unlawful search and seizures that are interpreted differently for them, so that they can enter our cars and stop us in ways that other law enforcement couldn't. Like, essentially, they can profile, so they can stop people. The court has said stop people like for looking the wrong way. So the original decision says for looking Mexican or having a haircut of the sort that a Mexican person would have. So, other law enforcement can't do things like that. They're not permitted. They might be doing it, but Customs and Border Protection can. And then you see, all the way up until today, where we're seeing court decisions relevant to this, that they also do things that really should be illegal and are never punished for it. So their rates of violent interactions, using their weapons, and in some cases fatally, those are extraordinarily high.
They're in fact, just today, and I'm not even sure if you're aware of this, because I think it may have just broke. I'm not sure.
Just happened.
Hernandez versus Mesa.
Yep.
Are you familiar with that? Can you tell us what the issue was there? And the court has ruled essentially that the U.S. Border Patrol agent implicated in this case is really not accountable at all for what they did.
Not accountable.
Will you tell us
impunity.
what it was?
Yeah. This is so. It's certainly not the first time something like this has happened. But a boy was playing at the border, and for people who haven't been to the border, haven't read about the border, haven't seen pictures of it, it's not like a line that you hop over. It's a zone, and there's different layers of fencing in various parts, and he had kind of started playing within the layer of the fence that put him over by U.S. American agents, and a Border Patrol agent shot and killed him. And the court's ruling today was about the question of whether the family can sue the agent, and the court said no. And so, that really, I think to most of us, constitutes total impunity when the family cannot seek any kind of satisfaction or redress for their child being shot.
Right, and to be clear here, this is not. They're not I just want everybody to understand what the question is here. They're not adjudicating whether the guard had any guilt or had done it with any intent. They're not making any judgment on that. They're just questioning whether the guard can actually be charged with anything or be held to account or can even go to court to have that question addressed.
Yeah, they're saying that essentially the family cannot sue in U.S. court, so they have no opportunity to seek any kind of justice. And it doesn't, there's question in this case about whether the boy had thrown a rock, but basically, as I understand it, it just came down, so I haven't read the whole thing yet. They're saying it doesn't even matter whether, even if there had been, if it's contested whether anything had happened at all, but there's
you can't even.
It doesn't matter.
Yeah, it doesn't even matter. Like the facts in this case, on some level, don't even matter because they can't be. The court is saying that they're so above the law that they can't even be. This question can't even be adjudicated. All right. Well, so we got a little ahead of ourselves, obviously, because we're present day. But let's talk about the Hart-Celler Act. This is really in 1965. You write the first, I guess, sort of recontemplation from the National Origins Act as to how we treat immigration.
Yeah. So there's kind of two sides to Hart-Celler. The side that you hear most often is that this is like the opening up of immigration to the United States because, indeed, we do completely eliminate racial and national origin quotas. So the act reorganizes and basically says we're going to let people in on the basis of skills, family reunification, and then refuge, because at the time we didn't really have a separate refugee program. So in one sense, it's really just turning things around for the United States, opening up to immigration and opening up to immigration from everywhere in the world. And it had not been possible to legally immigrate from large portions of the world ever in United States history. So this is a big change, going to allow immigration from African countries, from lots of Asian countries, and it does change the demographics of the United States. The underneath story is, of course, of what some of the authors wanted. And it's interesting because, underneath it, it's not a story about openness to racial change. It's a story about the fact that European immigrants were now considered white. And some of the authors of the legislation were debating about how to stabilize the population in the United States and keep it white. And their theory was that family reunification, which is now the bane of the existence of people like Stephen Miller, they call it chain migration, family reunification was going to keep this country European origin white because people would sponsor their family members from Germany and Ireland, which had been kind of incorporated into whiteness by that time, and that would kind of stabilize demographically the United States. And some of their quotes are extremely openly racist about immigration from countries that turned out to actually be sources of immigration for the United States. What you get almost immediately are lots and lots of people coming from, you get refugees coming from Southeast Asia. You get a large population of Vietnamese refugees. Just really demographically very different set of immigrants after 1965. So they were trying to keep the population white, but as often happens when Congress tries to engineer the racial balance of the population, it completely backfires and we get the exact opposite of what they were trying to do.
Well, now, why didn't they simply say, we're just going to open up immigration, but just to Europe?
I think there was a sense that it was unseemly and that what you wanted to do was do that in a facially neutral way without seeming to discriminate. And, that's something that you see different versions of, especially during the Cold War, which, kind of attempt to not look like there's racism happening when there's racism happening.
Right.
1965, it's right in the middle of of a lot of civil rights reforms, and I think there's a sense that one should not, on the face of things, be saying we don't want immigrants, from country X or country Y. But definitely that was the sentiment of some of the authors of the legislation.
Well, certainly Stephen Miller and Donald Trump have learned that lesson on some level, haven't they?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how, not so much with the facial neutrality. They're pretty open with it.
Well, that's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying,
yeah,
is that they're aiming for a wider immigrant population, and they're full on going for it, right? I mean, isn't in part like what the Muslim ban was ultimately about in some respects? They've expanded it, and they said, oh, we can have our cake and eat it too. We can, as long as we expand to just people who are not white, then we're not on the line for being anti-Muslim.
Yeah. I mean, there's some question in my mind about whether Stephen Miller is okay with any immigrant at all. But I think for most of the people to whom they're trying to appeal, this is a coming out party for white nationalists who have, been operating under kind of undercover for a really long time. One of the other stories I tell in the book is how influential people who wanted, a white United States, a white nation, how influential they were in policymaking. 1965 is one example, but you see a lot of interest group activity trying to put a pretty nice, shiny scientific face on white nationalism, starting especially in the 90s. You see it earlier, but really ramps up in the 90s, particularly after the first attack on the World Trade Center in 1993.
Well, let's move up in terms of time. Now, you also write about family reunification, that it's basically an outsourcing. I mean, part of this is premised on the idea that immigration is good, and maybe on some level we need to sort of restate that case for us. Because why don't we do that? Because on some level, like I say, Stephen Miller and Donald Trump are acting fairly rationally based upon their desired outcomes here. At the very least, they have internalized the lesson of maybe it's better for us not to pretend so much that we aren't racist, so that we can make sure that we get a racist outcome.
Yeah.
But make the case for immigration, or at the very, the positive case for immigration.
Yeah. There's lots and lots of good arguments we can make about free movement and human rights. In the case of the United States, we have practical interests at stake, and I don't think that we are entitled to the rest of the world meeting our practical needs, but it is the case that if we were to have fairly open immigration, we'd be much better off than we are with closed immigration. So there's a couple of different ways you can get at this argument. One of the ways I like to say, and I like to remind my students in class, the origins of borders were not really just to keep kind of ordinary people out. They were often to keep ordinary people in, because population is one of the most important resources the country has. In the United States, our native-born population does not replace itself. There's a number of births, I think 2.1, 2.3 births per native-born woman to be at replacement level. We haven't met that standard for a long time, but we have managed to not shrink and age as a population in the way that countries in Europe, Italy, or Japan also have, because we have had immigration into the country. So just in terms of having a labor force, having people who are both working and paying taxes, it's really important for the United States to keep its borders fairly open. We rely on that. It's also the case that there's really big economic advantages, not just to having immigrants in the country, but in particular to having legal immigrants, so people with legal status, and people who become citizens, but particularly being legal, having authorization, because although undocumented immigrants, 40% of undocumented immigrants pay not state and federal taxes, as well as other taxes on things that they purchase in real estate. But once you bump people all into legal status, they get paid better because they can't be exploited
Right.
in the same way, and then they pay more taxes. So there are those kinds of advantages that are really significant. You mentioned family reunification as an outsourcing, and Republicans right now just love to hate on family reunification because they are pursuing openly racist policies. But in fact, if we were to move, let's say, not to closing our borders, but to a points-based system, we're moving towards something that's similar to what Canada does. And Canada does not in any way only rely on a points-based system, so they have a very robust refuge program. But in Canada, they budget a lot of money that we don't budget for immigrant integration. So family reunification is a very, I say outsourced, it's a very low-cost way to get the work done that needs to be done when people come into the country from places and don't speak the language, or don't know how to navigate the bus system, things like that.
And we should be clear, the idea is that the family reunification obligates the family, essentially, to take care of this person who's coming in the event that they don't have resources or whatnot. And so that's where we're talking about, outsourcing this or privatizing the costs, although the benefits of this immigrant are socialized insofar as that they're ultimately going to pay taxes.
Yeah. So if you're undocumented, it's very likely that you're paying taxes, but you can't take advantage of any of the things you pay taxes for because you're legally prevented from accessing those programs. So if you're undocumented, you'll be paying into Social Security if you're paying your taxes, which, like I said, 40% are, and you'll never, even if you were regularized, the money that you pay in while you're undocumented, you never see it. So we're kind of cheating as U.S. citizens. We're taking that and not giving anything back. But if you're documented, then you're paying in even more, most likely, and your family is responsible for making sure that they can vouch for the fact that you will be supported.
Is that where, and again, I'm getting ahead of myself a little bit, but the public charge law comes in to basically say, okay, yes, we once we try and quash family reunification, and we no longer have, essentially representatives or families of people in this country who are agreeing to take care of the immigrants, we will then quash the public charge or use the public charge as a way of making sure that, okay, because we can't rely on families now to take care of our immigrants, we're only going to have rich people come in.
So sort of. I mean, we don't have to get rid of family reunification and public charge went into effect yesterday. The public charge rule, we've yet to see really how it's going to be used, but in its most restrictionist form, it would end almost all legal immigration to the United States because the formula for determining not whether someone has been a public charge, that's not what the formula is. The formula is for determining in the future would people be likely to become a public charge, and it is a really tough bar to meet, and there's lots of discretion involved, which is part of why people are worried that it'll just end legal immigration. But yeah, you're going to have to be able to prove that you will not in any way in the future become eligible for publicly supported programs. The thing is, it's a sensationalist thing in the sense that most of the programs that people like to talk about immigrants using, immigrants are not eligible to use and don't use.
Right.
And when you get to the point of being undocumented, of course, people are not just afraid to use programs that they're ineligible for. They're afraid to take their kids for stuff because they're afraid that will expose their own status, even if their kids are eligible. So it's going to lead to bad health outcomes, bad educational outcomes, and bad demographic outcomes, I think.
Okay, so getting back to the history, I guess, we go after the Hart-Celler Act. In the 1980s, do we really see any change in sort of the statutory framework of immigration? I mean, I know that we have Reagan has a significant amnesty during that time.
Yeah.
Are there any sort of like structural changes?
The amnesty is significant because it allows a pathway to citizenship for a bunch of legal short-term workers, people who'd been here on short-term visas, and then also allows a bunch of undocumented workers who'd been continuously present in the United States since 1982 to regularize, and that's a big deal. That also is the last point at which we update something that had been like a very, very low-key regularization program I talk about in the book since 1929 called Registry. Just said, like, if you got here by a certain date and you've been in the country being a citizenly person, you become eligible. So that's like and then of course that's the first moment at which there are employer sanctions for employing undocumented workers. It had not been, there'd been no penalty before that for employers who were employing undocumented workers. There's not a lot of muscle, like Congress doesn't put a lot of money into enforcement, but you do start to see a real enforcement mentality surfacing in the 1980s, in some part connected to the war on drugs, which was Reagan's less amnesty-oriented program, and then in part because there was like a panic being fomented about undocumented immigrants.
Let's jump to the Clinton administration and the story of MS-13 in particular. But if there's anything else there that you think we should highlight, MS-13 obviously played a big part in the 2016 election, at least in the context of Donald Trump's rhetoric. Well, what was the dynamic there with MS-13?
So MS-13 is a U.S. origin gang that is kind of like a lightning rod for both. I mean, for nativists, to be sure, but you'd seen a lot of people who'd been incarcerated as we started to engage in mass incarceration. Some folks who'd been incarcerated in the United States, then deported. That really fed into the development of some pretty devastating gangs in Central America that then found their way back into the United States. And so you start to see that emerging a little bit as an issue. Clinton, I think the most important thing to identify about Clinton is what happened in 1996. And in 1996, that's when you really see it's the moment in which mass incarceration and mass deportation of immigrants in the United States, both documented and undocumented, that becomes possible in a way it had never been possible before. We were incarcerating some people starting in the early 80s, but like what happens in 1996, 2 bills pass, same year that we pass TANF and get rid of welfare, and what happens is that a kind of special category of something called an aggravated felony. So an ordinary felony is 5 years, serious offense, usually a violent crime, something quite serious. 1996, just for immigrants, really, just for non-citizens, this aggravated felony, which only has a 1-year sentence, comes into existence, and we make detention mandatory for anybody who's committed an aggravated felony. But the crimes in some cases are so minor, like sometimes people aren't even serving any time for the actual crime, but they have to be detained. And then, so that's this ADEPA bill. Then we also get the Illegal Immigration Reform and Immigrant Responsibility Act, that just adds a ton of tiny crimes to that. These would be misdemeanors for citizens, like forgery, document fraud, bribery, skipping bail, things like that. But now they're subject to mandatory detention. They end up in deportation proceedings. for misdemeanors, and they really also suffer a real reduction in the rights that they have to try and like get due process. So the deportation machine, I think many people would date it to 1996 and Congress under Clinton.
And what was that a response to? I mean, from politically, because I'm trying to remember in 96, sort of the context in which that would come about. Was that just simply, it's not terribly contested, and so, people can get away with it? Or is it a function of NAFTA, or is it what's going on there?
I mean, so Clinton, had already been going after tougher enforcement on immigration a little bit earlier. So, policing some of the heavily crossed areas that were safe crossings to try and force people into the desert. That had happened a few years earlier. I think there was a real turning point in the early 90s where there's some pretty active, openly white nationalist organizations, a bunch of which were headed by this guy, John Tanton, who just died last year, had been funded by Mellon Scaife, and who were actively seeking to kind of change the laws to reflect a more closed immigration policy and white nationalist agenda. And they motivated people first using 1993, but then you may remember that before we knew who had committed the 1995 terrorist attack in Oklahoma City, a lot of people tried to pin it on Islamic extremists. It was two white nationalists, in fact, who did it.
Right.
But it kind of got people in this mindset of skepticism about immigration and immigrants that policy entrepreneurs were able to exploit.
And I guess, too, there was the rise of Pat Buchanan in the early 90s, and even on some level, Ross Perot's run may have sort of had some of those undertones a little bit.
This is a time of we're still in the war on drugs. There's this, it wasn't as if mass incarceration of citizens was unpopular. We were talking about super predators, and Clinton was friendly to that way of thinking about law and law and order, and it's just incredibly consequential and expensive in all kinds of ways.
All right. Well, when you start to talk about reforms in the book, one of the things you do is you talk about some of those 1996 laws. But let's start with the registry, which you had mentioned earlier. But you can go really in any order you want in terms of when we talk about the reforms that you're espousing. And I'm curious as to also the genesis of some of these ideas of your reforms.
I get the genesis is just watching a country that has an image of itself as one thing behave like the totally opposite thing for a very long time. I've been watching and just kind of wondering why we have such a self-destructive and other destructive policy. But so I think to understand the reforms I'm suggesting, the one thing we haven't talked about yet is what happens in 2003. And so after the September 11th attacks in 2001, right. Congress freaks out and wants to reorganize the federal government. It's a huge reorganization undertaken really hastily that ends up creating the Department of Homeland Security. So they start on
and
that
everything
right away.
Gets dumped into the Department of Homeland Security, everything.
It's just one of the biggest reorganizations of the federal government that's ever happened in the United States, and it's done in a rush, really slipshod. Bush didn't actually want DHS to be elevated to cabinet level. He opposed that. He only went along with it when it was presented to him as this is going to happen. It passed by, I think, one vote. It's not popular. But it takes what had been Immigration and Naturalization Services, the INS, which had existed since 1932, breaks it up into several different agencies and reorganizes them under Homeland Security, ostensibly because we faced national security threats that were related to immigration. That turns out to be such a dishonesty, such an untruth, that if you look at the budget, you can see over time the budget going immediately, pretty quickly from national security stuff to enforcement and removals. It just was a deportation machine pretty shortly after it was created. But the ostensible, the line we were told was that somehow the southern border was responsible for security threats to the United States. It's never happened. There's not anything being shut down there that could have happened but didn't happen.
But people have
It's
found
not a
prayer
security
rugs
threat.
in the desert. Isn't that true? I'm being facetious. I'm sorry. That was a that was a big.
A little wound up.
That was a big. Yes, I'm sorry about that. I get a little bit dry at times. No, that has been a. I still feel like that is. I don't know if they're still running that same story every 3 weeks on Breitbart, but that was the. Some soccer jersey.
You're made of stronger stuff than I am, if you can read.
Well,
I actually went through some of the. John Tanton's organizations are FAIR, FAIR, CIS, and Numbers USA. First two have been classified by Southern Poverty Law Center as hate groups, and I looked at their data and their attempts to show that there are security threats at the southern border, and they can't. They just have nothing.
I mean, the most recent version was in the run up to 2018 when Mike Pence was out there saying that we've caught 70 terrorists in the caravan or wherever it was. He was saying at one point.
Yeah, look to see what they can pursue. There's just zero evidence. But we have these agencies since 2003, and they're immense. So we're giving just those agencies, just Customs and Border Protection and ICE, over $20 billion a year, and that doesn't even count the fact that they tend to overspend their budgets. That doesn't count the money that they're taking away from sometimes from Pentagon spending, from other cabinet level agencies, and like we've already said, to do what? Mostly to perpetuate this culture of impunity. But I take readers through that story because it's really important to see how hasty, how poorly thought out, and how costly those changes that were really reactionary emotional reactions to September 11th, how they've been. And I say three things I think we really need to do. We need to create a way in the United States for people who have been here for a long time without authorization but have been citizenly to become authorized and become legal residents of the United States. So what I do is I refer back to this old provision that goes back to 1929 and say, look, we used to say if you'd gotten here by a certain date and you had behaved in a citizenly fashion, and we had, reasonable standards for that, that you were eligible to regularize. And we need to go back to that kind of system because what we have now in the United States is interesting. All of this enforcement, it starts just as the undocumented population starts to plateau and then decline, just as unauthorized entries start to decline, just as apprehensions at the border start to decline. And we are in that position now. You would never know it from reading the news. But that's where we are, and we're spending all this money. So we have this population of people in the United States, many of whom have now been here for a long time because we're not constantly renewing with tons of new undocumented immigrants. We need to give them a way to become citizens. So that's one of the policy suggestions I make. I think we need to dismantle what was done in 2003. DHS, ICE, and CBP really, really are dysfunctional. And we need to go back to an organization that is mostly a kind of welcome mat services to help people navigate the process of being in the United States when they weren't born here.
The book is Illegal, How America's Lawless Immigration Regime Threatens Us All. Elizabeth F. Cohen, thanks so much for your time today. We'll put a link of that book at majority.fm.
Thanks so much.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Bye. All right, folks. Interesting stuff.
Immigration is definitely one of my bailiwicks. So it's always interesting to get a new perspective on it. I've tended to approach it more through the lens of labor history, with people like Daniel Denver and Justin Akers-Chacon. but the racial stuff is definitely part of it too. NAFTA played an interesting role, actually, if you'd like to hear about it in brief.
Sure.
So the crackdowns on illegal immigration in the 90s, in the Clinton era, were due to all of the factors that she said, as well as a way to assuage fears that NAFTA would cause a wave of immigration into the U.S. that we were not equipped to handle. At least that's what I got from reading Daniel Denver's book. Some people portray the push for more open borders as part of neoliberalism, but that's just not true. And I'm talking about open borders for people, not for capital.
What was the fear that there'd be more immigrants here? Because the big fear, as I recall in the time, was the giant sucking sound as all the jobs actually go to Mexico.
Yeah, it's strange, right? Because Janet Reno initially sold NAFTA as a way to decrease immigration. But what NAFTA actually did was it drove people off of their farms and into cities looking for work, and ultimately drove many more illegal border crossings. And you can't have U.S. companies exploiting people in Mexico and places like the Maquila Zone if people are not then trapped in Mexico, right? The immiseration is what drives the immigration. It did not do what they said it was going to do. In fact, it did the exact opposite.
Well, part of it was, too, that you had the U.S. corn 50% cheaper in Mexico than Mexican corn.
Yeah, they flooded the markets with cheap corn. They drove subsistence farmers off of their land. Basically, everything that the Zapatistas predicted was going to happen has come true. Also, a way that criminalization of migration has functioned, I don't know if this is intentional or not, but it's functioned as a way to police labor populations, divide up workers, and keep wages for U.S. born workers and non-native workers low.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but some of the TA workers who were let go because of the strike, where was this at?
UC Santa Cruz.
I think they were threatened with, part of your status being here is contingent on you being employed as a faculty or a
That's
TA.
a nice little way to control people.
We were watching it happen in real time still.
All right, well, folks, we got to take a break, head into the fun half. Should remind you, the Embark dog DNA test. It's the key to unlocking your dog's unique breed mix and genetically informed health needs. You want to treat your dog right? You want to know what to feed them? You want to know what diseases to be looking out for? Maybe there's medication that you can take if you are aware that they have a predisposition to a specific disease. Embark DNA test kit. Kelly talks about her testing her dog Edie. Tested clear for all 171 genetic health conditions, so she was super psyched about that. They also look at over 200 breeds, down to like a 5% breed accuracy. So check it out, Embark Dog DNA Test. It is the most comprehensive on the market, and right now Embark has an exclusive offer you cannot get anywhere else. Go to embarkvet.com. Use the promo code majority. Save 15% off your dog DNA test kit. Visit embarkvet.com. Use the promo code majority to save. Just a reminder, this program relies on your support. When you become a member, you not only get the free half, free of commercials, you also get extra content virtually every single day of the year. Not every single day, certainly not the weekends. And not every single weekday, but I'd say 98%. And we should really actually run the numbers on something like that. But go to jointhemajorityreport.com, sign up. Join us tonight for our live debate coverage. This is something that what we'll do is we'll probably, like the live debate coverage, we will now, we'll shoot it on video, and then we'll upload it for members. And you'll be able to watch it in the app. Damn. Right? We've got other members' benefits coming shortly, too, en route via that app. Don't forget, check out TMBS, which was last night, not tonight, Michael Brooks show because of the debate. They did it last night. Who was on that show? Do you remember, Matt? You were here, right?
Yeah, Ben Dixon and Richard Wolff. Richard Wolff was in studio. So we talked about Ben Dixon about his ongoing campaign against Michael Bloomberg, and talked to Richard Wolff about Marxism and socialism and the labor theory of value.
Dude's the Bloomberg slayer.
Very cool.
He is. But, I mean, Ben Dixon really... how much money do you think Bloomberg would have to spend to undo the damage just done by Ben Dixon's Twitter account?
No kidding, right? And Ben could have probably just gone to Bloomberg and said, hey, dude.
He would never, though.
No, that's the thing I like about Ben. Well, there's other things I like about him, too. It wasn't specifically like I met him and I'm like, you're the type of guy who would never sell out to Michael Bloomberg. Folks, also, check out Nomiki Kant's new show, The Nomiki Show. When I don't have to say her last name, I can say her first name right. Somebody keeps dogging me on Twitter about it. The Nomiki Show. And also, if you're in LA and we're trying to work out a simulcast situation, but she is doing a show in LA for Super Tuesday. And so if you're in LA, check that out. If you go, I think, to her Twitter feed, maybe there's a URL for it, but she's going to be here tonight, so she'll tell us then. But she's doing a live show in L.A. David Dayen's going to be on it. Michael Brooks, apparently, is headed out there to do that show.
Doing live shows, wow.
Yeah.
Live shows are the thing now.
Yeah, I guess. For the kids. The oldies don't do that, though. Sometimes we'll do one. We'll do a live show. We got one coming up on Election Day, folks. And you know what? The rookies do like an hour live show or a 2-hour live show or a 3-hour live show or a 4-hour live show.
Plus
let me tell you what the pros do. They do a 12-hour live show. Yeah. On Election Day, which is also our 10-year anniversary, but we don't need to get into that. So check out the Nomiki Show on Patreon.com. Jamie.
This week on the Antifada, I speak with Faye Eckler, Vice President and founding member of the Socialist Rifle Association, about gun control, mutual aid, community defense, and why it's a good idea to have an armed left. Now, I will admit to being kind of conflicted about gun control myself. I'm still not totally sure what the correct socialist position is on gun control, but Faye made some very convincing arguments in favor of responsible gun ownership and having an armed left in a country that is already awash in guns and has an armed right. So food for thought, things to chew on. Check it out, patreon.com/theantifada.
This is Michael Bloomberg is defending going Scott Brown over Warren because of Scott Brown's gun control. Bipartisanship. So
wait, what's that?
There's new talking points from the Bloomberg campaign because he supported Scott Brown over Warren, and Bloomberg saying he did that because of reciprocity on some gun control stuff or something. So
he's claiming that Scott Brown was going to do
was a gun control bipartisan guy, so that's why he supported him over Warren.
Right, which makes all the sense in the world because we know that Scott Brown was a vote against the Republican Party. Incidentally, folks, Scott Brown was Elizabeth Warren would have been the 60th vote in the, I'm thinking of Coakley, his race against Coakley. When you vote for a Republican, and this is what, Bloomberg is going to have to address when it comes to why he gave $4 million to Toomey in Pennsylvania. Never mind the money he gave to Rick Snyder, who poisoned all those folks in Flint, Michigan, and more. But when you support, and I don't care if it's Michael Bloomberg or, I don't know, Emily's List or whomever. I think Emily's List may have supported Collins in the past. I'm not sure about that. Sometimes they make some choices that I think are very bad. When you support a Republican, particularly in the Senate, you give power to the Republican Party. It doesn't matter what that individual does because the Republican Party is going to protect the NRA. So when Mike Bloomberg says that, what he's saying is, I'm not going to say that. What he's saying is, hi, here's a bag of crap that I'm selling you that is actually a bag of gold. I was going to say something about him doing something horrible in his mouth or something. I wasn't going to say. I don't know why. I'm a little bit agitated. So here it is. Jack Pfiffer. There's been a question floating as to why Mike Bloomberg supported Scott Brown in a Senate race over Elizabeth Warren. Response: Mike Bloomberg supported Scott Brown in Massachusetts for many reasons. One of the biggest being Scott's willingness to buck the NRA.
Well, let's hear some of the others too, man.
And his party, to oppose concealed carry reciprocity that would have allowed people with gun permits in other states to carry hidden handguns in New York City. Mike Bloomberg. Scott Brown's opposition to that was irrelevant. Bloomberg has continued to fight for say, yeah, okay. In other words, open wide. I'm going to shovel it in. Sorry.
Don't piss down my leg.
Yeah, good point. All right, did you want to say something, Matt?
Oh, yeah, check out Literary Hangover, folks.
Don't piss down my back and tell me it's raining.
Exactly, where I don't piss down your back.
That's right. That's one of the best things about that show. You can listen to it and nobody pisses on your back.
Don't even piss down your friend.
Nope. Folks, see you in the fun half. Left is best. Jamie and I may have a disagreement.
Yeah, you can't just say whatever you want about people just because you're rich.
I have an absolute right to mock them on YouTube.
He's up there buggy whipping like he's the boss.
I am not your employer.
You know, I'm tired of the negativity.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to upset you. You're nervous, you're a little bit upset, you're riled up.
Yeah, maybe you should rethink your defense of that, you fucking idiots.
We're just going to get rid of you.
All right.
But dude. You want to smoke this joint?
Yes.
Do you feel like you are a dinosaur?
That's some good shit.
Exactly. I'm happy now.
It's a win-win.
It's a win-win-win.
Oh, hell yeah.
Now listen to me. 2, 3, 4, 5 times. 847-906-501-457-238. 56, 27, 1/2, 5 eighths, 3.9 billion.
Wow.
He's the ultimate math nerd.
Don't you see?
Why don't you get a real job instead of spewing vitriol and hatred, you left-wing Limbaugh?
Everybody's taking their dumb juice today.
Come on, Sammy.
Dance, dance, dance.
Rand Paul.
I had my first post-coital scene with a woman. I'm hoping to add more moves to my repertoire. All I have is the dip and the swirl.
Fine, we can double dip.
Yes, this is a perfect moment.
No.
Wait, what?
You make under $1 million a year. You're scum. You're nothing.
Excuse me? Fuck you, you fucking liberal elite. I think you belong in jail.
Thank you for saying that, Sam. You're a horrible, despicable person.
All right, gonna take a quick break. I want to take a moment to talk to some of the libertarians out there. Take whatever vehicle you want to drive to the library. What you're talking about is jibber jabber.
Classic. I'm feeling more chill already.
Good. Donald Trump can kiss all of our asses.
Hey, Sam. Hey, Andy. You guys ready to do some evil?
Hitler was such an idiot.
That guy might be a Nazi.
Agreed.
No.
Death to America.
You.
Yes.
Wow.
Wow, that's weird. No way! Unbelievable. This guy's got a really good hook. Throw our hands up.
Ooh.
Wow.
But Sam, I gotta get off.
No worries. Let's. I want to just flesh this out a little bit. I mean, look, it's a free speech issue. If you don't like me,
Hey, shut up!
Thank you for calling into the Majority Report. Sam will be with you shortly.
yes, ladies and gentlemen, we are back. Let's go right to the phones. You are calling from a 215 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hey, Sam, it's Mindy.
Mindy!
Hi, how are you?
I'm well. How are you?
They're killing me. I came out as a Bernie.
Hell yeah, that deserves a drop.
I came out on Twitter as a Bernie. I always kept my Majority Report on my Twitter separate. So I came out as a Bernie on Twitter.
Yeah.
And I lost like 2,000 followers. They're like, and not even the following. Forget the following. I don't give a shit about the following. but they're like so mean. The people are so mean. They say the Bernie bros are mean. The Biden people, the Warren people, the Bloomberg people are so mean.
Well,
they're killing me, Sam. I don't know what to do.
Well, I would say, I mean, my recommendation would be to hop off Twitter for a little bit.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, this is the primary season is nasty. It's nasty. It was nasty in 2004. I was very happy that I wasn't on the radio until basically the end of the primary season. 2008, it was, I still feel like I get mean emails from Pumas to this day. 2016, obviously, super nasty. And the only thing I would say is that, you know, this stuff, obviously, it goes every direction. Everybody, you know, who... people who support Bernie say, like, you should see. Look, we've gotten some emails from the K Hive, which I had no idea.
The worst.
I mean, look, everybody's the worst, and I want to reiterate what I said yesterday. Is and I think, you know, there was a story in the Daily Beast about a low level. I don't mean to denigrate. I mean, he was a field director in a, you know, in a, I think it was in Michigan, who, a guy who had a Twitter feed that was private. I mean, 3,000 to 4,000 people. I mean, I don't know if it's, I would call that, it was locked. Let's put it that way. It wasn't broadcasting to the public at large, but it was 4,000 people. I can't imagine he knew all of them. And obviously somebody, you know, sort of took screen grabs and reported it. And basically what he was doing was, you know, the functional equivalent of the, you know, the sort of satire or you know, what do they call it? Shit posting, they call it. And it was more like...
Trolling.
Yeah, no, it wasn't really trolling. It was really just sort of like comedy, nasty comedy.
Trolling's meant for now.
It was
right.
Tweets fairly
like
typical of like funny gay leftist Twitter.
Yeah, and you know, it's
like
not.
Jay's the Wick.
Well, yeah, I mean,
like Jeff the Wick.
Oh yeah, I don't know. I don't know who any of these people are. But the point being, is that, like, look, and I thought Bhaskar Sankara had the best sort of tweet on it. When you are affiliated with a campaign, whether you like it or not, you're affiliated with a campaign. And if you're going to talk that way and you're going to, you know, say that stuff, it's going to reflect on the campaign. That's just, sorry, that's just the way things work. And you need to be aware that that's the case, which doesn't mean that the story in and of itself was really anything other than useless. To me, it was like basically a Project Veritas thing. We found one guy. It was easy. You know, it's even actually like less than that because this guy was doing this. Obviously, it was comedic. And Bhaskar's tweet was basically playing off of Natalie Scherz, which is campaign staffers shouldn't shitpost, and the campaign was in a tough spot, had to let him go, etc. But it's also true that framing a gay organizer's bitchy gossip from a locked account as an urgent news story that undermines redistributive politics is lame as hell. And Bhaskar said, yes, exactly. If you're part of a political campaign, you don't get free speech. You need to be more disciplined than the rest of us. But if you're a journalist or editor pretending this was a legitimate story, you're worthy of contempt. I think both those things are true. And you can't control what the editors or journalist does. And so, you know, just as you've experienced, and look, right, you're not saying like random Twitter peoples, you know, you associate it with the campaigns that these people are supporting. And that's just the reality of this. And so, you know, I would say take a, you know, break from Twitter so you don't drive yourself crazy, and just know that, like, you know, listen, I'll tell you what I would tell Saul. Sticks and stones can break your bones, but names can never hurt you.
No, Sam, you're missing the point. I don't care that they're yelling at me. I don't care that they're hurting my feelings or they're being mean to me. The point is that, I mean, I don't have a huge Twitter following, but I seem to have good substantive conversations with people, and I don't have any Bernie followers. So because I don't have any Bernie followers, I can't talk to anybody about this because I can't talk to anybody at home about this because they're all not Bernie followers because everyone at home.
We need a leftist best follow of Mindy.
I am a powerful poster in the Bernie community, as are all of us, I think. I will retweet you and get you some Bernie followers who I'm sure will be very happy to be your friends.
Yeah. I mean, we also value your links to those people.
Yes, we do.
We value your links to those people as well. So
that's actually far more valuable than anything else. I mean, look, you lost 2,000, but how many did you start to think like, hey, wait a second, maybe I should recontemplate. Maybe I should think about this a little bit more. That's the important thing. That's the work you're doing.
Well, I tweeted about your show this morning.
I saw that.
And
yes.
I picked up like 150 followers, and then people are telling me that Crystal Ball is a Republican, and they're all screaming me about her. And then
what? But, she's not a Republican.
I tweeted.
She literally ran for Congress as a Democrat.
What?
She works with one.
She ran as a Democrat, right?
She literally ran for Congress as a Democrat.
Yeah, so just read the comments on that. People are so ill-informed.
I'm not going to.
Very last thing I'll tell you. I was in a diner last night with my 84-year-old mother and my husband, and there was a woman that was 2 booths over that was somewhere between my age or my mother's age. And she was schooling her girlfriend, who was somewhere between my age or my mother's age, on why they need to vote. And they absolutely 100% have to vote for Bloomberg, because if they don't, Bernie is going to take everyone down. So, my husband was like holding me back, and he's like, Mindy, shut the fuck up. Don't go near her. Like, you're gonna ruin her, like, early bird special. Just leave her alone. So, of course, I had to go to the... What? No, he was like, because he's not really as political as me. And he knew, like, my face was turning all kinds of colors, and my mother's, like, hearing aid was like, she couldn't even understand what was going on. But I got up, and I said, I have to go to the bathroom. And they knew where I was going. And I went over to her, and I tried to educate her for 10 minutes at her table. And I think, I got through to her a little bit, but...
Or maybe she had to go. Maybe she had to pay the check.
No, these people...
Yeah, go ahead.
No, these people are so... The older people that are my age and older are so programmed to think the establishment is progressive. Like, they're so... I cannot explain to you what it's like for me to talk to people. I literally am blocking my girlfriends that are Democrats on my phone because they're, like, sending me Bernie Russia articles. Like, they're so mad at me that it's just... I just think that, I don't know, is he going to get my age group, suburban, white, Jewish women, or educated?
Well, to be honest with you, listen, the fact is that Bernie is weakest with that cohort, which was a key cohort in the 2018 election. Suburban women, both white and black, were key cohorts to come out in the 2018 election. And it is a problem. And that is why, Mindy, you're such an important ambassador to that community. It's also... It's also why,
I don't want you to think I'm I'm like, I'm self-grandizing, but
no,
I think I have like a mid-level influencer platform, and I think
listen,
if I can turn...
Mindy, you're literally in ground zero. Like, one of the challenges that Bernie will have if he wins the primary in the general election is apparently supposedly the fracking ban in Pennsylvania. I haven't looked at the numbers enough to know that, but what he is definitely going to need, you and your friends. And look, there's multitude of tax. Listen to me.
Tim, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I have been DMing Fez, everybody on their team, that Ari guy.
Okay.
I would.
I mean, they may have other things that they really got to get doing, but
I mean, they're not. They won't contact me back. Like, I'll do anything.
All right. Well, Mindy. You're DMing literally the top 3 or 4 people in the campaign, and they probably have a lot on their plate. What I'm suggesting to you is that maybe you do something that's a little bit more localized, or,
That's
listen.
why I have 95,000 followers,
Well, I know 95,000 people. I understand, but if you told me they were all from your district in Pennsylvania, I would say, okay, now wait a second, we're on to something. And if they were all sort of like, similarly situated as yourself, I would say you're on to something. But 95,000 people is a lot of people. But don't get too carried away.
I understand that.
They're dealing with 110 million people. When they're looking at this campaign.
I could maybe, sway a lot of Pennsylvania people if,
Well, but there's no reason why you can't do this, Mindy. There's no reason why you can't do this. Now, the tax that you can take are going to be contingent upon the people you're talking to. You're now an educator, right? And you meet the student where the student is. And so if the student is worried that Bernie is going to, radically, fundamentally change the country, you can say, no, what Bernie's going to be doing is going to be pushing progressive policies. And to the extent that the Democrats have any power, frankly, a lot of the Democrats are not as progressive as he is. The Republicans are not. And if Bernie doesn't get these proposals through, which is very possible, the one thing he will do is he will make it clear to the rest of the country that the problem is the Republicans. It's not going to get caught up in sort of like vague negotiations about will you cut parts of Social Security? He's going to lay it out there. We want to expand Social Security. We want to expand Medicare. We want to.
You should hear the arguments, Sam. The arguments are like, what's the point of voting for him because he's not going to get Medicare?
I just told you.
Well,
I just gave you the answer.
I know. All right, I'll try to be.
The answer is that finally, if he does not get this stuff through, the difference is that unlike during the Obama years, where Obama lost 1,000 down ticket seats across the country, statewide elections and whatnot, the difference is that when Bernie, if he doesn't get any of this stuff through, it's going to be quite clear who the people who are stopping it are. And that has value. It doesn't have value the next day for Medicare for All, but it has value 2 years down the road, 4 years down the road for Medicare for All. It will make it clear where everybody stands. And part of the reason why we have the situation we have is that there's been a lack of accountability with our politicians. And part of the reason why there's been a lack of accountability is because there has been a reluctance by the Democrats to lose in a way that makes it clear where everybody stands.
Right.
And so even if Bernie...
They want the Chris Coon method.
Exactly. And even if Bernie does not get these proposals through, and there's no reason to believe that, frankly, Joe Biden's going to be able to get his plan through any more or less than Bernie will get his plan through.
What's his plan? His plan is to be
whatever. It doesn't matter. My point is that there's structural realities that are going to prevent a Democratic president from getting stuff through. But the point is, who is going to lose in a fashion, if they do lose? Who's going to lose in a fashion that is going to set up a victory down the road? And that's Bernie
pushed all the candidates to the left. I mean, he did a good job with that. They're all, he just did a really good job. But I want to say one thing to Julie.
I'm listening.
Keep watching American Psycho.
You what?
American Psycho. I just keep watching Christian Bale in American Psycho, and I just keep laughing and thinking of you.
Right?
Like Pete.
I said right.
Right? Is he the same? He's like an ugly Christian Bale.
All right, we got a lot of stuff to cover. We're in the middle of a major primary campaign.
Mindy.
So that's it. I just wanted to tell you that last thing, if you guys could give me any help, it's not a vanity project. I just I get my message out, and people I do feel like I do get people to listen to my side. So if you could just get the message out, then I'm a Bernie.
What's the
and
Twitter
have Bernie
feed?
People follow me so I can have support. It would make my cause a little easier.
Okay.
Oh, Mindy.
What's the feed?
We will introduce you to lots of fun Bernie friends that you're really going to love if you keep on doing the Lord's work and talking to your people.
What's the Twitter
I'm
feed?
going to talk to my people. Just get Bernie people to follow me, and I'll be great.
Okay. All right.
What's your Twitter handle?
It's Jamie, you know my Twitter handle. Come on.
Oh, well, the audience,
Mayday, Mindy 9. Mayday, M-A-Y. Mindy, M-I-N-D-Y 9.
Mayday, Mindy.
All right, everyone follow Mindy.
Thanks, Mindy. Bye.
I met a guy.
Appreciate the call. Appreciate the call. I mean, we can't. I mean, it's.
I need to have her on the Intifada.
Got to stay on point. Got to stay on point. Yeah, have her on.
I want to keep talking to her.
Oh boy. Oh boy. All right, we'll take one more quickie here. Calling from a 847 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hey, Sam, it's Josh from Chicago.
Josh from Chicago.
I was in South Carolina this weekend.
Ah, and how is it this time of year?
It's nice. It was 60 degrees, a little chilly for my taste, but I can't complain, Sam.
No,
can't complain.
I know. All right, so what's it look like?
So yeah, we went to a lot of on Sunday. We went to a very rural area, like really far, like about 45 minutes out of Rock Hill, which is where we were. And it's not easy to canvass because it requires driving. Houses are very far apart. It's hard to tell where addresses are. It's a primarily, black area where we were. Or there was primarily black voters we were talking to, and response was really positive. We met one woman who was, I think, a Clinton voter in 2016, and she's middle-aged, sort of working class black woman, and she was really excited that we were there. She was really excited about Bernie, and she was really excited to go and vote for Bernie on Saturday. And we were just like, the thing that I was seeing is that the Steyer support there is actually not very it's not very solid. I know he's been polling in under Bernie, but like above the viability mark. And I actually think he's it's basically based on sort of ad recognition. And I also don't think Biden's ground game is very, very strong, and he's not reaching those voters that we were talking to. And I think just in general, for me, it was actually kind of very humbling. Because this is a place that Bernie lost by 75 points in 2016, and for us to sort of be welcome in this area, and for people to be considering Bernie, a lot of these people who didn't vote for Bernie in 2016, for them to be considering Bernie was actually, I think, a kind of humbling experience, I think, for me and for a lot of people. And we also went to the suburbs of Charlotte, because Charlotte's right on the border between South Carolina and North Carolina, and it was sort of area that I expected Pete and Warren and Amy to be sort of very have a lot of name recognition in. And the undecided voters that we were talking with, a lot of them were considering Bernie, and that's not typically where Bernie's base is. These are sort of more affluent white suburbanites who were, liberal, but they were, I think, especially after Nevada, they were considering Bernie. And so I think Bernie has a very good shot at, if not winning South Carolina, coming within a point, and I think it's sort of negligible after that.
Interesting.
And I would also just encourage people who are calling into South Carolina, and even if you're going there, I think there has to be sort of a difference. I noticed that I had to check myself as someone who's a member of BSA, because I realized I was also canvassing people who were interested in Bernie and who liked Bernie, but might not have my same sort of socialist beliefs or whatever. And I would also just encourage, especially people who are talking about Bernie or bust, maybe save that till after Super Tuesday when the South votes. We actually were able to get our Lyft driver to switch from Biden to Bernie when he asked if all of us would vote for the nominee, and we all said yes, except for Bloomberg, obviously. But I mean, to me, I think it's fine for people to be Bernie or bust if they want to be, but I think sort of spreading that attitude, especially when South Carolina and other Super Tuesday states down south where Bernie didn't do well and he's now surging are about to go, might not be the best thing. So that was just sort of my observation down there, especially in South Carolina. But,
Josh,
he's got a really good chance.
Appreciate the call. Hope you're right. Thanks, man. Hey, I guess he hung up on me. All right, I'll take one more. Let's see what we got here. Got a lot of people hanging on. I didn't take any calls yesterday. Calling from an 832 area code. Where are you calling from? Who's this?
Hello, Sam. This is disgraced former mayor Pete Buttigieg calling from South Bend, Indiana. Well, I saw your little show yesterday.
Yeah, little.
And we have a saying in South Bend. It goes like this: you think darkness is your ally, but you merely adopted the dark, Sam. I was born in it, molded by it.
Wait.
I didn't see the light until I was already a man. By then, it was nothing to me but blinding. Blinding like those cell phones. The shadows betray you.
Wait a second, dude.
They belong to me, Sam.
Dude, this is from Batman. That's Bane said that.
I've been accused of plagiarism. I may have been accused of plagiarism this week. All right, but I did not steal that speech from Barack Obama. I stole it from a little character called Bane.
Yeah, no, I heard that. Yeah, that was Bane. But actually, I'm glad you called. I was gonna say your voice sounded a little deeper than I recall too. But here's this. And now that we have you on the line,
I'm wearing a large mask on my face.
I used to do a Bane impression. Do you remember that? I used to do one.
I forget why we used to do
I don't remember why I used to do that either. But hold on for 1 second. I'm glad that Mayor Pete Buttigieg called in because I had a question about this. Who pulled this? The circus? That show? Who is it?
I don't know.
B-Town?
The Recount.
Oh, The Recount. I don't know, some show. And they, I just want you to listen to this. This is a video of a speech that Pete Buttigieg gave and one that Barack Obama gave running at the same time. It's actually a compilation of stuff. Here we go.
The way we do every other election by giving it to the person who got the most votes. Just a thought. Brings us together. Now, this country was built. It is a movement reaching into church basements and barber shops, into universities and union halls.
And if we can line up the neighborhoods and we can line up the city,
shines as a beacon around the world once more.
And this is our chance to answer that call.
Now, those are brief little snippets, and I suppose, I say the word and I know a lot of other people do too.
Say folks.
And I say folks, and I don't think that they're necessarily copying me, but what do you have to say to that, Pete Buttigieg?
Actually, I've ceded the phone over to my friend Barack Obama. This is Barack Obama. Let me be clear. You need to answer the question, do you feel in charge right now, Sam? Do you feel in charge?
Is that another Batman reference?
They only let you watch one film while you're in the Oval Office. Very busy job. I don't know if you know about that today.
No, I didn't realize.
Know about that.
You have all your references from Batman.
I'm here to talk about something much more important than Batman now. There's a podcast called Pod Damn America. Okay? Now let me be clear.
Okay.
They're doing a live variety show at Caroline's Comedy Club on Super Tuesday, March 3rd. You absolutely must not go to this live variety comedy show featuring Ted Alexandro and Kate Willett. You absolutely must not buy tickets in advance.
We have a
little saying. We have a little saying in South Bend.
Yeah.
We don't damn America. We stan America.
Oh, I see. Okay, you don't damn America, you stan America. Is this Jake Flores?
Yeah. Hi, Sam. How's it going?
That was pretty good. I mean, your Obama's better than your Buttigieg, I got to say. But your Buttigieg is the best I've ever heard.
Thank you. I was going to do it through a gas mask, but I didn't think the phone would. This is a half-assed attempt.
No, I thought that was pretty good. And so, wait a second. So you're doing a show on Caroline's on Tuesday? This whole thing, all we're doing is advertising other people's shows on Tuesday.
Yes, me and my podcast, Pod Damn America, featuring Alex Patak and Anders Lee, are doing a live big old variety show at Caroline's on Super Tuesday. where, we're going to watch the results and do all sorts of, segments and sketches and things. And I need to put some asses in seats. So thank you for letting me hijack your show, Sam.
All right. Well, anytime, folks. And where can they get tickets? At the Caroline's website or something?
Caroline's website. That's right.
Oh, all right. That makes sense.
Well,
Jake Flores, ladies and gentlemen, from Pod Damn
America. We did our live show together with Pod Damn America, and they were all very excellent. So I can only imagine how they're going to be when they don't have me dragging them down.
Hi, Jamie.
Hey.
All right. Thanks for calling, Jake. All right, folks.
Thanks.
We'll put a link up for you. How's that?
Thank you.
And we should do that for Nomi's show in L.A. because they're not competing. They're two shows. And, we only have like 3 tickets to sell for ours here because that's all the room we have on the couch. So I think
it's like a press box or something.
Yeah, it's just a press box. That's it. All right, let's go over some of this. Let's play this Joe Biden clip. Folks, we have an announcement to make. This is going to be... I'm as about to say the words. Like I hate to say never say never.
Get your words straight, Jack.
Okay, Jack. This will maybe be the last type of Joe Biden clip we play of this ilk, right? Because, we'll see what happens in South Carolina. If Joe Biden pulls away by 10 or 12 percentage points, then maybe we have to get back on this case. Now, we're going to still do drops. You have a drop policy, right? Why don't you state that, Matt?
Well, we don't want any of the ones that show sort of cognitive decline.
Right.
But like the ones that, so for instance, him saying, oh gosh, we're running out of them. He said,
"Come on, man." That one we're going to do. We'll do "Come on, man," and we'll do "Bless Me, Father."
Yeah, come on, man.
Yeah, we'll still do that. But the cognitive decline, Joe Biden.
Bless me, Father, if I have sinned.
Those videos, those drops, they're going to end after we play this one. This is our swan song, as it were. But look, you're on the campaign trail. It's exhausting. And some of your muscle memory kicks in from when you ran for the Senate 22 years ago. Was it 20 years ago? Yeah. I mean, it was certainly in the aughts, maybe. So maybe it was 15 years ago. But the issue is ultimately like, it's going to get a lot tougher than this, and the stakes are going to be a lot higher because he's going to have to, if he wins the nomination. Here he is in South Carolina, not doing himself any favors.
And you're the ones that sent Barack Obama the presidency. And I have a simple proposition here. I'm here to ask you for your help. Where I come from, you don't get far unless you ask. My name's Joe Biden. I'm a Democratic candidate for the United States Senate. Look me over. If you like what you see, help out. If not, vote for the other guy. Give me a look, though, okay? That's all I've really got to say to you. I'm about...
The other guy? The other guy? Did he say vote for the other guy? The other guy. He went into just automatic pilot mode.
I guess he could have said, if I was going to spin this, I would have said he meant to say from the Senate, but not for the Senate. I'm a candidate from the Senate.
From the Senate?
Which is still wrong.
He was just the vice president.
But, I mean, I don't know.
Well, play it again, because it's the last time we're going to play one of these things, so I want to play that again.
And you're the ones that sent Barack Obama the presidency. And I have a simple proposition here. I'm here to ask you for your help. Where I come from, you don't get far unless you ask. My name's Joe Biden. I'm a Democratic candidate for the United States Senate. Look me over. If you like what you see, help out. If not, vote for the other guy.
The other guy.
Maybe he's coming out as bi and simultaneously outing the other bi.
Yeah, I was going to say, who's the other bi?
That would be me.
There it is, ladies and gentlemen. Joe Biden. South Carolina was always his firewall. Depending on whose average of polling you are interested in, his firewall. Let's put it this way. Let's see, 3 months ago, November 12th. Well, let's see. Let's see if I can get it to actually. It's like actually 3 months ago. So November 25th, 2019, Joe Biden had 35 points in polling on the RCP, Real Clear Politics poll average, 35 points. Warren had 16. Sanders had 12 or 13, I guess you want to round up. And today, Joe Biden's lead is a little more, about 5 points. That's the 538. He's the polling average, I think, is well, that's actually just giving the actual. Is that the average? I think the average on on RCP, it's 26. You know, they have different polls that they use. 26, 27, and Biden's 21, 22. So it's about 5 points. On 538, I think he's up by about, what is it?
What's
7
that
points.
Bump he just got?
7 points. Yeah, just got some bump there. It's unclear what it is. That seems to coincide with a drop in Steyer. Maybe that's him coming into the state and doing a little last week advertising and whatnot. We will see. If it is the case that his ground game there is weak, then we will see that poll eroded, that lead eroded. But the bottom line is, this was his firewall. And if Bernie Sanders comes within 5 percentage points of him here and, splits the delegates, Joe Biden's just not viable. We have a poll that came out yesterday, I think it was, Morning Consult, maybe it was this morning. I think it was last night, showing that Bernie Sanders' polling lead has increased and that he is now leading amongst black folk in the Democratic primary. And so we shall see.
Hell yeah. We've
shall see.
been hearing from a lot of analysts that Biden's support is squishy because a lot of them are low information voters who are willing to switch when presented with new information.
Well, I don't know if it's that they're low information voters as much as it is that his support was a function of, and I think there's a lot of Democratic voters this year, as opposed to other years, where their number one determinant is whether they think this person can win in the general election.
Oh, that too, for sure.
And nobody knows why, really for sure who can win or not. But certainly past performance is at least, a cue for people. I don't know if it's accurate, but it's a cue. And if Joe Biden's claim to fame and his number one qualification is that he can beat Donald Trump, it is hard to reconcile him losing the first 3 primaries and the idea that he is the candidate who can win. Mm-hmm. And so that's always been Joe Biden's liability, is that his depth of support is pretty shallow insofar as it's tied into his ability to win. And as he doesn't win, it becomes less likely that people perceive him that way. So.
Yeah, and if he's no more electable than Bernie is, people might default to the issues that they care about because they care about those in addition to electability.
Yeah, it's certainly possible. But we'll see after tonight anyways. And then we'll see we'll see what happens. Well, the debate is tonight. I should say the election is Saturday. Sorry, I keep getting that confused. All right, let's go. We were going to play this clip yesterday. I'm not terribly interested in, continuing to talk about, just some random pundit on MSNBC. I'm a random pundit on MSNBC. And I don't know if I would like it if somebody built their whole YouTube show. Of course,
you would.
I would like it. I would like it. But that aside, and I want to say, I encourage you to do that. Actually, I've had a pretty good experience with that in the past. But I think this is important because Michael Bloomberg is a unique entity in the Democratic field because Whereas I don't, I mean, Joe Biden, I think, honestly, like the biggest thing that scares me about Joe Biden is that I just do not think that he has the stamina to run a robust campaign and has the depth of support to beat Donald Trump. His policies, not my favorite. Pete Buttigieg, I think not only do I think he would lose, but I think like he doesn't have any policies. He stands on nothing. And I don't, a guy like that is just going to go to the highest bidder immediately, it seems to me. And others, I have my various complaints with different, all the candidates, including Bernie Sanders. But Michael Bloomberg represents a problem of a different ilk. Yes, I think he pursued a tremendous amount of racist policies in New York City. Yes, I think his understanding of the financial crisis is highly problematic, particularly in terms of what he would do going forward in that regard. Yes, I think his desire to cut Social Security and Medicare and Medicaid and perceives these things as luxuries in some way is problematic. And yes, I think the fact that he walks amongst us as if he was a deity and the rest of humanity is basically, it's his responsibility to take care of for them. But that's, it's some type of Straussian perspective. But the other thing that is highly problematic, that is indicative of a problem that we have in our democracy, is the influence of money, the influence of concentrated money. Concentrated power that exists in the context of corporations and concentrated power that exists in the context of individuals who have so much money that they can literally change the course of things like Bill Gates doing with education in this country for the worse, by their own admission. Michael Bloomberg is going around now. Yes, it's true that he gave money to Republicans to take the Senate. Yes, it's true that he financed Rick Snyder in Michigan. I mean, do you think he's going to win in Michigan? I mean, aside from the fact that I think like he is a guaranteed lose in the general election. What is really important is people understand the impact where that type of concentrated wealth has on our government and on our society. All the endorsements he's bought, that kind of money is really fundamentally at the root of problems that we have in this country. It's both reflective of a problem and it is in some ways a problem in and of itself. It's both. That must be named. And you could say he is a plutocrat. That the money, he is part of the plutonomy, and because he has so much money, and we played that video yesterday. Maybe we should play the other one soon. We have another one, but it's super important for people to understand it. He is an oligarch. He has so much money that he has the power of literally tens, if not more than tens of millions of people to shape the policy, but speaks with one voice, and often it could be whim and completely misinformed. I mean, the reason why people were poisoned in Flint, Michigan was because of a failure of democracy, because the electeds were stripped of power and the governor simply appointed someone to run that city and they were not accountable to the people. Imagine that times 10. When you have someone whose money is the basis of all their power. And so when Jason Johnson refuses to accept the concept that Michael Bloomberg is an oligarch, it is very problematic. And he must know it because here he is on XM satellite radio, referring back to an argument that he had with Nina Turner on MSNBC about the term oligarch. And here he is changing and reinterpreting what that exchange was all about. I don't know if maybe he went and looked on Wikipedia or what, but here he is explaining it on the Karen Hunter show.
her professionally, wrote great articles about her when I was
He's
at the
talking
Chicago
about Nina
Defender,
Turner.
When everybody thought that she should run against Marcia Fudge. Okay, so like I've been cool with Nina for a long time. I've had personal conversations with her about her support for Bernie and what I think about that and whether or not it makes sense. What actually happened on the air was she was doing an interview with Chris Matthews and she referred to Mike Bloomberg as an oligarch. And she was like, "Oh, we got to do something about these oligarchs, et cetera, et cetera." And I was like, "Good God, really? Really? Is this what we're doing?" And so the studio said, "Hey, Jason, would you like to say something?" I said, "Look, this is not the kind of language that you should be using in campaigns. This is that high-minded grad school cipher crap that a bunch of sort of liberal pinheads want to throw out because they want to sound smart. You don't go around calling people oligarchs in America. First off, most people don't even know what the hell it means.
But he is kind of an oligarch, though.
But that's not the issue."
Okay, pause it. All right. So there it is. Okay. So the fact that he's an oligarch is not the issue, according to Jason Johnson in this interview. And the reason why you don't do it is because you're not speaking the language of the people, of the masses who don't know what an oligarch is. Now, first off, I got news for you. You're watching cable news. If you don't know what an oligarch is, you should be educated to that because you represent a significantly small portion of people in the country who theoretically are the most interested in politics. And therefore, that is the most important people to educate because they're the ones who go out and talk to other people, theoretically. But I'm not here to argue whether it is smart to say the words oligarch if you're running a campaign, which, again, this is a debate show with Chris Matthews.
Nice of him to care so much about Bernie messaging.
But that's what it is. If this is a messaging thing, then how does he explain this is what he said on that day to Nina Turner, which is not, if you hear the word messaging, you tell me.
Nina, you work for a candidate who's part of the 1%. I have no problem with criticizing the system that allows Mike Bloomberg to make all the money that he makes, the system that allows him to buy what he wants to buy, the system that allows him to buy himself into the administration and buy himself into the debates is a problem. But to call him an oligarch, I think, is a misnomer in this environment. And again, you're working for somebody who's part of the 1%.
Pause it for 1 second. It's a misnomer. That means you've named him incorrectly. He's not an oligarch, in other words. Now, a misnomer in this context, I don't know what that means. That's like, for us oldies, like, Norm Crosby doing a routine on the Tonight Show. A misnomer in this context? No, that's exactly the context in which you would call him an oligarch. It's the context in which he's an oligarch. But continue on. No, hold on. I want to keep hearing him. He's going to, because theoretically, right, this is just about messaging. Professor. He's a professor.
Part of the 1%. Do you call him an oligarch? No, you don't.
Yeah, go back.
And again, you're working for somebody who's part of the 1%. Do you call him an oligarch? No, you don't. You say he's a rich guy. Because just
all right,
because...
pause it. Now, I don't want to quibble about whether Bernie is in the first. I don't want to. I will. If it's in with the 1%, it is true that in 1 year, Bernie Sanders earned, and maybe in multiple years, I don't know how long the book pays off.
Got a long tail, Sam.
He was in the 1% of income. Nationally, it's like $400,000. I would imagine in Vermont, it may even be less. In New York, it's like probably double that. I don't know. But in terms of net worth, you need, I think it's $2.5 million to be in the 1%, if I'm not mistaken, in the United States. And Bernie's net worth is somewhere around supposedly $2 million. And he writes down...
February 5th.
And then he says, and then he goes on February 5th, he says, like, he talks about all these oligarchs. He puts Bernie Sanders in with George Soros, Mike Bloomberg, Mark Cuban, Donald Trump, Oprah, Jay-Z. The disparity, I mean, we played the video the other day of the rice, right? Like, yeah, look at the money. $60 billion for Bloomberg. Tyler Perry has $600 million. George Soros has $8.3 billion. Bob Johnson has $1 billion. Bernie Sanders has $2 million in net worth. Bill Gates, 110 billion. I mean, this is just absurd. It's just absurd. And all right, so let's go back. So it's, I don't want to, I'm being a little picky, 1%. But the bottom line is, let's hear it, because maybe there's more opportunity. I don't want to cut them out. I don't want to come off.
Does he think oligarch just means someone with money?
It means when you have so much money that you can go and change the nature of U.S. education for decades because you think in your head you know what you're talking about. And then after the 10-year experiment's over, in terms of the Gates Foundation, you hire the Rand Corporation. They tell you, we got it wrong. Should have listened to the educators.
It's sort of like the difference between buying a mayor and buying mayors, plural.
Right, exactly. Or, you know what? I got news for you. Like, you got to be in a pretty small town to take some of your $2 million net worth and be able to buy a mayor.
Like, I don't think...
You might be able to get like one parking spot somewhere.
Parks and Rec Center.
Right, like here's $50,000. Can I get a parking spot out in front of my house or whatever it is?
Like, I don't think Jay-Z's ever bought a mayor.
Well, I would...
I have no idea what Jay-Z is doing.
Jay-Z's a billionaire, so
he's
let's
living
not
it up.
defend Jay-Z.
Exactly. Here we go.
Do you call him an oligarch? No, you don't. You say he's a rich guy. Because just because somebody has a tremendous amount of money doesn't mean that they're not necessarily representing the people. And if you want to use the term elite, you can use whatever kind of term that you want to use. But at the end of the day, the enemy of this country, the enemy of the poor, is not just everybody who happens to be rich. It is a capitalistic system that abuses people. And if you want to speak about that, that's fine. But if you want to name call people, that's not going to help Bernie if he becomes a nominee, and he's going to need Mike Bloomberg's money.
All right, now listen, here's the fact. It doesn't matter if you have a capitalistic system. If you have someone who has so much more money who has more money than 50% of the population combined, and it was probably like Bloomberg has more than 1/3 of the population combined, to be fair. He has more money than 100 million people together have in this country. It doesn't matter if there's a capitalistic system or not. That's why you can have in systems that are not capitalistic, that are just simply like, I don't know, just aren't even systematized. You could have an oligarch in Somalia, where there's like barely a system.
Yeah, you could have an oligarchy under some form of authoritarian communism.
Exactly. Somebody comes in and has that type of money, they're an oligarch. It's not it may be capitalism that created that oligarch. The existence of that oligarch is a problem in and of itself. And you could tax that oligarch in such a way that it would confiscate that money. We could just say, in a capitalistic system, one law. We're doing one law. We're going to do one reform. Cannot own more than 500 million, say 250 million. I don't know, 150 million, whatever. You pick the number. Everything else about the system is exactly the same. It's just that you can't have that much wealth. And if you do, we confiscate it through taxation. If you want to leave, capital flight, we lose a couple of billionaires, big deal.
It's like a salary cap.
Big deal. Big deal. A rich man buys one loaf of bread a day. And you would get rid of that one problem. There'd be other problems. There's no doubt about it. But you would get rid of that one problem. That is, they would not have the money to go and drop $750 million into education. They would not have the money to go and drop $5 million like the way that where's my pen? Where's my favorite pen? Not even favorite. Where's my third favorite pen in the office? I lost it. Oh, well, that's what $5 million is to that dude. And you start to buy people all around. That's basically what we're talking about. So.
Well, it's somewhat encouraging that even Bloomberg stands are forced to pretend to criticize capitalism.
Yeah. Yes.
Also, this guy's a tenured professor.
I know.
Yeah, I got news for you about credentials.
Yeah, I mean, this is probably just my like PMC upbringing talking, but you expect them to be a little more coherent than that.
To think that oligarch might have sort of connotations outside of just talking about Russians in the 90s. Yeah.
Maybe he's getting paid by Bloomberg. Who knows?
Should we do this Grinnell thing? What should we play? Oh, here we go. Let's do Tucker Carlson. So this coronavirus, I mentioned this yesterday, and we're going to increasingly talk about this, I think. Brendan says it's not that deadly. I'm not sure about that, buddy.
It's not that deadly. Don't worry about it. It's all going to be fine.
We have over 80,000 infections globally. 77,000 cases have been reported in mainland China. Nearly 3,000 deaths. This is according to the Associated Press. China's not been exactly transparent about this stuff. And Donald Trump is not pressing them very much because he's afraid of the stock market and the trade deals going south. The virus continues to spread rapidly. The disturbing part is, now, there's a couple of different stories about, coming out of China. One of the problems with having an authoritarian regime, and there was a great piece by, I can't remember, I can never pronounce her name, Zaydem Tukfri or something, I think it's in the Times, where, you can listen to everybody, but a lot of times you can't hear. And in the same problem that you had in Michigan, Flint, Michigan, where people were complaining about the quality of the water, but because there was no electoral accountability, there was no response to that. You have the same problem in China. And you also, in these authoritarian regimes, have this problem where everybody's just covering their ass. And if you saw Chernobyl, the depiction of Chernobyl accident, you would see that dynamic. To the point where the guy who first reported on coronavirus in China was actually died and was basically arrested by the Chinese for exposing it.
Well, on the upside, they're good at enforcing quarantines.
Well, they are good at enforcing quarantines, but the idea that it spread so quickly in China, when they have that ability to do quarantines, which we don't really anywhere else in the world, and certainly not in this country, is a little bit alarming. Nevertheless, what do you take away from this? If you're going to report on coronavirus, do you talk about how problematic it is that the president of the United States seems to be both ignoring the CDC and downplaying the whole thing because he doesn't want to upset the stock market because he's afraid it's going to impact his reelection? Here is Tucker Carlson giving his take on that.
If that concerns you in any way, if you think maybe we ought to take some steps to protect ourselves from it, then you're a bigot. Coronavirus panic is racist profiling against Asians, lectured some arrogant moron at Slate.com. A writer for the Seattle Times warned that, quote, yellow peril racism was the real epidemic fear, and so on. Countless publications wagged their fingers in the face of readers and told them it was irrational, probably immoral, in fact, to worry more about the coronavirus than the annual flu. Identity politics trumped public health, and not for the first time. Wokeness is a cult. They'd let you die before they admitted that diversity is not our strength. So fast forward to today. What began as a regional outbreak in the city of Wuhan, China, is now spreading across Europe. Parts of Italy are shut down tonight.
Yes, it is diversity that is spreading. Now, the fact is that how many tens of thousands of people die? How many thousands of people die of the flu every year?
A lot.
The flu very well may be more deadly, but the idea that like what are we supposed to do? We're supposed to put a cone around China or some way? I mean, what is it exactly?
I mean,
because we have Chinese people in this country?
It is true. If you stopped everyone from moving around the globe, that it would stop the spread of disease, but that's not going to happen.
Well, it's not just, but that's not addressing diversity. We have diversity. It's that you want to stop air travel is what you're talking about. And I don't think that's what Tucker is saying.
Is Tucker against planes?
There are 16,000 deaths from the flu, the CDC, in this country. Is that right? Every year. annually. 280 now. So it is quite possible that the flu is more dangerous. The coronavirus is, I think, 280 out of I don't know. It's a little bit less than 5%, 7% death rate. It may be similar. So this is just another thing that is on top of it. But the idea that this is a function of diversity, as opposed to like having an interconnected world with airline travel and with cruise travel and whatnot, is absurd. Is absurd. And if you're really worried about stopping the coronavirus, maybe you should get on the phone, because apparently you have the ability to call the president and tell him to stop worrying about the stock market and getting the country prepared to deal with it. Because our preparedness is apparently zilch. Like,
we got the market health insurance, health companies.
I'll remind you, we have 16,000 deaths annually from the flu. And I can assure you that our vaccination rates for the flu are much higher than they are for the coronavirus.
We can't even get the vaccine for the coronavirus yet.
Is there one yet?
They're working on it. I just read an article about it.
Yeah, I mean, that's my point. Is that, and probably the place where we would manufacture this is also under lockdown, more or less, at this point. There's a story from Axios that there are now 150 potential drugs. We don't know what they are, but they include antibiotics, generics, and some branded drugs without alternatives, are at risk of shortage if the coronavirus and outbreak in China worsens. This is according to two sources familiar with a list of at-risk drugs compiled by the FDA. Now, I would imagine they're not going to release this list because people are going to start to hoard them. The agency has been in contact with hundreds of drug and medical device manufacturers, also coordinating with global regulators like the European Medicines Agency. Well, the diversity. You woke people. So stupid.
This is like when Dave Rubin went on Tucker to say that wokeness was causing the California wildfire.
That's
outbreak.
true. That's true. Because you have all sorts of like, I don't know what I don't even know how, I can't even come up with a fake.
We need more minorities on this firefighter truck before we can go out and fight fires, I guess.
Right.
That's
Sorry, we don't have a quota. Can't fight the fire.
That's how they riffed it anyway.
Unbelievable. Here is Bernie Sanders on Anderson Cooper. Like I say, Michael Bloomberg is unleashing the kitchen sink on Bernie Sanders. And of course, because it's Michael Bloomberg, it's a gold-plated kitchen sink. The really tough stuff is that 43 years ago, he wrote a satire that was the aim of which, at least as articulated in the piece, was saying that we are constrained by our traditional gender roles. He did it with some pretty bad satire, rapey stuff. But
whomst among us has not written some boneheaded stuff in college?
I certainly got in trouble for some satire of that ilk.
I don't think Bernie's. I wonder what these two guys talked about in this meeting. If it was.
I mean, look, it's ironic. Bloomberg is obviously dealing with trying to pay off people who he, had settled with over sexual harassment suits. And so one of the best defenses is a good offense. This came up in 2015. In fact, I tweeted out an NPR article about it that dealt with this in 2015. But some of the other stuff is that Bernie Sanders almost said the identical thing that Barack Obama did about Cuba. And here is 60 Minutes interviewing Bernie Sanders about that.
Back in the 1980s, Sanders had some positive things to say about the former Soviet Union and the Sandinistas in Nicaragua.
And everybody was totally convinced.
Here he is explaining why the Cuban people didn't rise up and help the U.S. overthrow Cuban leader Fidel Castro.
He educated the kids, gave them health care, totally transformed the society.
We're very opposed to the authoritarian nature of Cuba. But, it's unfair to simply say everything is bad. When Fidel Castro came into office, you know what he did? He had a massive literacy program. Is that a bad thing, even though Fidel Castro did it?
All right. And so, one thing we should also say is that when Castro came into power in the first couple of years, initially, the United States was an ally of Castro's. And it is quite true that particularly, leading up to the Bay of Pigs, Castro was quite popular.
The whole reason the Bay of Pigs happened the way it did is because we had this theory from like expat Cubans in our own right-wing places that we would go there and everyone would be like, oh, thank God the liberators have arrived. And actually, no, they got torn up on the beach.
Yep.